Welcome to Big Questions. This is Cal Bussman, and I never thought I'd be putting out a podcast like the one today. It's about a 90-year-old man who just beat COVID. That 90-year-old man is my dad, Herb Fussman. As those of you who listen to Big Questions week after week know, I moved from Los Angeles to North Carolina last August to be near my dad after COVID broke out. He was getting by okay during the pandemic, but he was alone, and he was dealing with two chronic illnesses that had no cure. One was a rare disease that in his case attacks the heart, amyloidosis. The other was a smoldering cancer called multiple myeloma. But he was mentally as sharp as ever, drove to Costco and did his own shopping in bulk, cooked his own meals. He'd play tennis almost every day until 3 years ago, when he was 87. He ate and continues to eat pastrami sandwiches, cheese omelets, blintzes, rice pudding, and cheesecake. He ate the way he wanted to eat, and he lived the way he wanted to live, and he remained a rock for everyone in the extended family. When we got to North Carolina last August, my wife, La Gloria, and I took a place 5 minutes away from him, and we went to see him every night for dinner and a movie. We watched from a very cushy sofa that his grandkids loved to sleep on when the entire family convened on Thanksgiving. One of those couches that you can really sink into. And I quickly noticed that when he tried to stand up from that couch, it almost seemed like he was being gripped by quicksand. I suggested that it was time for a new couch, but he refused. He probably refused because he was thinking about his family instead of himself. And he couldn't imagine a Thanksgiving without his grandkids laughing and splayed all over that couch. As time passed, it was evident that his legs were weakening. But when his toilet had a problem, he couldn't imagine not getting down to fix it. And when his iPhone fell to the floor, he naturally reached down to pick it up. Only that time, he lost his balance, went down, and fractured his pelvis. Broken hips are fairly common when you reach the 80s and 90s. My dad battled through rehab at a facility near home. I couldn't get inside to see him because of the COVID restrictions, but I was happy to drive over every day and deliver the food he loved. And I was so glad to be able to set up the wheelchair ramp for him when he arrived home. I began sleeping over to be nearby as he transitioned from his bed to a walker, to a wheelchair, to a recliner that we moved in to replace the cushy couch. On a visit to the doctor, some of his blood work didn't look good, and he was sent to the hospital for some tests. He was tested for COVID before he entered the hospital, and the test came back negative, and why shouldn't it? He had had 2 shots of the Pfizer vaccine early on, but when he returned home from the hospital a few days later, he started coughing incessantly. I took him back to the doctor to find out what was going on. As we walked in the office, there was a young woman at the door asking those familiar 20 questions. You know, do you have COVID? Have you been near anyone with COVID? Do you have a temperature? And I actually cut her off and said no to everything. I said it because my dad had gotten the shots of Pfizer early on, and he tested negative when he'd gone into the hospital. But the doctors wanted to do a COVID test anyway, and we were shocked when his test came back positive. Turns out, when you have pre-existing problems, the vaccine's 95% effective rate doesn't apply. A lot of people are surprised to hear that. We sure were. My dad made a decision then and there not to go back to the hospital. He was determined to fight it out at home. The doctors at Duke were great and accommodating. They got him a monoclonal antibody infusion at a drive-up-to clinic to lift his chances and allowed us to deal with the virus at home. Duke Home Care and Hospice team sent over oxygen tanks. My dad's a straight shooter, and one doctor we talked to, also a straight shooter, started a sentence with the words, "Well, either you're going to be dead within 4 days or..." There was one night where my dad coughed nonstop for 8 hours straight. It was the definition of helplessness for him and for me. All I could do was stand by and watch. Thank goodness Deirdre the nurse showed up in a protective visor the next day. She'd had COVID herself and beat it. And she asked if my dad was sleeping on his back. Yeah, he said. Don't. Turns out sleeping flat on your back when you got COVID exacerbates the coughing and makes it harder to breathe. My dad had a hospital bed installed on the day he'd returned from rehab, and we inclined the headboard, and that's when I saw how alert and sneaky this virus is. It was like watching a boxing match. When my dad shifted strategy in the bed, all of a sudden, he became hard for the virus to hit, and you start to think you got your opponent beat because the coughing diminishes. You begin to feel relieved. You're thinking you're winning. And then, out of nowhere, 3 days later, the coughing comes back with a flurry. It was like the virus had a mind of its own, had been lying in wait, conserving its energy, looking for the next opening to attack again. But, rock that he is, my dad just weathered the storm and kept getting up for more cheesecake. I got him into the shower, prepared him his meals, watered him down with milk and magnesia to make sure his bowel movements were regular. I'll never forget one morning when he woke up with a smile and said, "Hey, how you doing?" Another day, another slice of cheesecake for Herb. After 2 weeks, he was pretty much free of that cough and back on Zoom calls. My brother Chet was able to drive up from Florida and prepare jambalaya. I didn't want to push my dad through a long interview, but I thought it would be a good time to record a short conversation of some of our memories of the experience. Here it is, conversation with 90-year-old Herb Fussman, my dad. All right, you ready to take a victory lap?
Ready.
Well, congratulations, you beat COVID.
Well, the Fussman family wins again.
Well, you've been watching the news since COVID started, hearing all the stories. Was what you went through very much like what you heard and saw on news reports?
I really didn't know what to expect, but to me, the worst thing that happened during that 16-day period was I had a hacking cough that intermittently was driving me crazy. But during the last week or so, the cough has been less and less and less. So I'm really happy with the results so far. I mean, I'm not hacking away the way I did before, where you could hardly catch your breath. And things are good. Things are good. That was the only problem that I had. And now the problem is less and less and less. So right now, I'm extremely happy.
What was it like? We were on a phone call with the doctor who, when he heard the symptoms, heard you tested positive, basically started a sentence with, after he found out you're a straight shooter, he said, well, either you'll be dead in 4 days, or what was it like when you heard those words?
I knew I was not going to be dead in 4 days. No one was going to kill me in 4 days. I have a big desire to hang around a little. I don't want to hang around if I don't have quality of life, but 4 days without quality of life is not a showstopper for me. It's got to be a hell of a lot longer than that.
Well, you talk about quality of life often. What is quality of life to you?
Quality of life is where I can do many of the things that I'm used to doing. Not all the things, I understand that because of I don't know whether it's COVID or I have three other major medical problems. So I don't know which of the problems to attribute to the fact that I have no strength in my legs and I have this cough. I'm assuming the cough has everything to do with COVID, the strength of my legs. It may be the multiple myeloma that I have, but I really don't know.
Well, when you think about quality of life, what does it mean to you, like day by day? What is quality of life?
What it means to me is that I can get into bed, out of bed by myself, take a shower, walk into the shower, walk out of the shower by myself, sit down and eat a meal. I can't obviously prepare the meal, but you've been preparing the meals for me, and I'm really enjoying them. And I don't know that I'm eating any differently than I ate before this COVID thing occurred. I'm still able to get around with the walker, but obviously I'm not able to do many of the things that I was able to do before I got hit with this illness. I mean, I can't play tennis, I can't dance, I can't do a lot of things that I used to enjoy doing, but I accept that. And to me, as long as I can get around the house, do all the things that in my mind are necessary to get along, I think to me that's my definition at this point in time of quality of life. And my one goal is to hang around till Thanksgiving so my family and I could get together and spend, like I think it was the 26th Thanksgiving together. To me, that's very, very important to me.
Well, we're certainly hoping to see you there. And I'm wondering, as you were thinking about like moving forward with treatments, we went into the doctor's office, and it was kind of a strange experience because they have a young woman out front who hits you with these 10 COVID questions, like, do you have a persistent cough? Have you been in contact with anybody who has COVID? And I remember wheeling up, and we had been, for the most part, either at home where there was no COVID introduced to our lives, or you'd spent 4 days in the hospital where they were doing some tests on you. And so I thought, well, we got this beat. And I told the young woman, answer is no to everything. And then we get in the room and they say, you know what? We want to take a COVID test anyway. And they take the test and come back and say, you just tested positive. Was that a shock to you?
Yes, it was. The way I look at it is, to me, in this instance, I was just very unlucky. I have no idea how I picked it up since I left Duke on Friday. After passing the test on Monday and then coming home and not interacting with anyone. So where did I get the COVID? I have no idea. It's just unfortunate, and something I just have to deal with. I'm assuming it has something to do with my immune system, which is really not where I would like it to be or where any of the doctors would like it to be.
Well, I tell you what, I was sure shocked when I heard that you had tested positive. And it really set into motion a crazy 2 weeks for me. And I say crazy because, well, listening to you cough all through the night, that was a crazy experience. Certainly, I'm not feeling the helplessness that you are, just coughing, but to be listening to it and not being able to do anything about it, that wasn't easy.
That was the most difficult thing for me. at the very beginning where I would cough for 15, 20 minutes, have difficulty catching my breath. And like for a week, it was like that. And I'm saying to myself, this is not the way I want to live the rest of my life, spending so much time coughing. But over the last week or so, everything has just turned around. I still cough occasionally, but not as often and not as long. And the time I spend without coughing has increased dramatically. So I'm very, very happy with that. Unfortunately, anything can revert back to the way it was, okay, then it would be a major problem for me.
Well, that was the crazy thing about it. And we had some really good luck when we had a nurse come over who had COVID. Remember, Deirdre came over.
I remember that.
And she said, well, how are you sleeping? And you said, well, I sleep on my back. And she said, oh, no, you can't sleep like that with COVID. That will exacerbate the coughing. So you basically either have to turn over and sleep on your stomach or
raise the headboard.
And we were able to do that with a hospital bed. And that made a huge difference. And
it's all a learning process. When you have the COVID, you have no idea. And then when someone who has the COVID tells you, oh, you should do this, well, you better listen because she's gone through the experience. And I started and I listened. So I'm assuming that's helped a lot.
The tricky part for me watching this was it was almost like watching a prize fight because we shifted strategy and you were sleeping in a position where it couldn't get to you. And so now you're not coughing and you go the next day without much coughing and then the following day without much coughing. And we're thinking, hey, we got this beat. But this virus is very tricky because it's almost like it understood, okay, I can't hit him from there. I'm just going to wait a while and look for an opening and then attack. And then all of a sudden, 3 days later, you get this burst of coughing again.
When you say you stopped coughing, that was an overstatement. I never stopped coughing. What happened was over a period of time, the coughing lessened and lessened and lessened where, if I woke up and I started coughing for 10 minutes and I was okay for the rest of the day, that was perfectly fine with me. That was perfectly fine. And it seemed to me the coughing was mostly in the morning when I woke up and about 5 minutes before I fell asleep. And other than that, once I fell asleep, there was no coughing. Once I finished coughing after waking up, for the rest of the day, there was maybe some coughing, but nothing that really disturbed me. And this is where I am right now.
Well, we celebrated when we passed the 4-day mark.
Yep.
And then you got to 14 days, and basically the sort of a quarantine period is over. And now it seems like you're in a pretty good place. You're getting good sleep, and your mind is completely alert. It was alert through the whole process. I don't recall your mind slipping a beat during any of this. Do you?
No. Unfortunately, my mind has not been affected. So I'm fully aware of everything that's going on around me. And sometimes I have to accept what's going on. And sometimes it's very discouraging in terms of what's going around. But I'm just trying my best, giving it my best shot, and we'll see what happens.
You were 90 years old right before that whole burst of activity where you went into the hospital and you spent 4 days there, and then you came out and then you tested positive. Is there something about hitting 90 that's different from 89, or same old, same old?
Cal, when I was 87, I had symptoms for multiple melanoma.
Myeloma, multiple myeloma.
Myeloma,
Right.
okay. They had a different name for it at that time, based on the tests that they were taking. And I also had a disease called, I can't remember the name of it.
Amyloidosis.
Amyloidosis, okay, which is a very rare disease. And I have no idea. All I know is that it shortens your life, and the drug I'm taking for it will not stop the amyloidosis, but it will slow it down. So, basically with the multiple myeloma and the amyloidosis, and I had a heart attack, I'm not what I would call the perfect candidate for any kind of medical testing and stuff like that.
Well, it really seems like you got through this just stubbornly sticking to your guns and getting the rest, being in the proper position, eating at the same times every day, sleeping at the same times every day. It really seemed to me, watching this, that caring for yourself at home is a really good option.
It certainly is. And I think, to me, the most important thing is the care I'm getting from my family. You've been here 24/7 for God knows how long. Chet comes to visit every so often. And Gloria came in before I had the disease. So, all I can say is whatever I've accomplished has been with the help of you and the rest of my family, but like 98% you. You've been a fantastic helper in terms of getting me through this.
Well, I guess
I don't think I would have been able to get through this without you.
Well, I got to say, these have been some of my finest hours. I never have lived a life of calm. And these last 2 weeks basically forced calm upon me. I've always lived a life of going someplace new or meeting somebody new or being in the kind of movie scene where you're running across the bridge and it was falling and you had to get to the other side. And almost, when I look at it, there's a very addictive quality to it. And the last 2 weeks have been just spent keeping the calm and snuffing out the cough. And it's really been an amazing experience for me.
Everyone has a different reaction. Mom had cancer, and for the last 2 years of her life, I did things for her and with her that in my wildest imagination I would ever do. But in helping her in any way I could, for whatever reason, made me love her more during those 2 years than the previous 54 years of our marriage. And it's a hard thing to describe, but when you're dealing with someone who's in a critical situation and you're there helping the person, it just gives you a feeling of love. Maybe love is not the right word, but that's the word I choose to use. And all I can say is, if I had to do it all over again, I would not change a thing.
Well, that leaves us to the last question. And you always use this phrase. I've come to love this phrase, playing with house money. What do you mean by that? You've been playing with house money.
What I mean by that is, for 87 years, I never had a major medical problem. In fact, I went to a doctor maybe once every 5 years. I was very active, never had any medical issues. And at 87, things started turning around. So I guess what I'm saying is that If you can live 87 years without any problems, and then the last 2 years, all of a sudden these problems hit you, to me, you're playing with house money. You lived 87 wonderful years without any medical issues. Nothing can beat that. You're playing with the house money. And if I had to do it all over again, I would not change a thing. I would not change a thing.
Well, let's keep it rolling, and let's see you at the card table around Thanksgiving with the family, enjoying yourself. And I'm very grateful that we got a chance to have this conversation in front of the microphones. I'll always cherish it. And especially given the last 2 weeks and those hacking coughs, a distant memory, and we can look forward to hitting the card table for Thanksgiving.
Cal, there is no way I can tell you how much I appreciate all the things that you have done for me in the last few weeks, months, whatever, okay? You've always been at my side. You've helped me in many, many ways. You've just been terrific. You've been terrific. I couldn't ask for better sons than you and Chet. I love you both.
Well, thank you. And I may have been here for the last few weeks or months, but you've been there for my whole life. So you deserve it. And we'll maybe get the next half of this podcast done around Thanksgiving.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, cheers. That about wraps it up. I want to thank Tim Ferriss for introducing me to the world of podcasting. Probably never would have recorded this if not for Tim, so thank you, Tim, for the path you've set me on. There are so many people, my dad, my brother Chet, and I want to thank for helping my dad first get through the fractured pelvis, then through COVID. The experience taught me how precious every day we have is, and the help we got and continue to get gives us more of those days to be cherished. The Duke healthcare system was at the center of my dad's care. If I singled out every person we were fortunate to come in contact with at Duke, this thank you might last for hours. Who knows? Maybe days. It almost brought on tears hearing my dad thank his primary care physician, Bidehi Buanapali, and his oncologist, Christina Costa-Chase, for all the care they'd extended to him over the years, not knowing if he'd ever see them again after he got COVID. And through the entire process, I found myself stopping to look at every healthcare worker we encountered, thinking about all the risks they've taken and all that their families have endured in this last year and a half. God bless them. There were so many other people who guided us and offered support, people I've been introduced to by friends and who've connected with me because of this podcast. Let me start with John Olajide, CEO of Access, that's AXXESS. Access.com is a technology company that offers a complete suite of solutions for care in the home because, as the company motto states, the future of healthcare is in the home. You'll hear from John talking about that care that's going to be available in your home down the road on the healthcare podcast I'm going to start as a spinoff to Big Questions. It was John who gave me the knowledge, the confidence, and the connections to manage the fight against COVID from my dad's home. It's beautiful when connections lead to connections. John turned me on to Tim Rogers, President and CEO of Home and Hospice Care of North Carolina, and Tim turned me on to Cooper Linton, the Associate Vice President at Duke Home Care and Hospice, who turned us on to Dr. Chris Jones. And that led us to Deirdre and Donna, the nurses. All of the advice, tips, and tools they offered enabled my dad to outlast the virus. Then there's my friend, Dr. Jordan Schlane, who's always there to answer any question in a moment's notice with some of the smartest people behind him. Talk about reinventing healthcare. There's a guy on the front lines. What a blessing it is simply to know Dr. Jordan Schlane, and you're going to be hearing more from him when my podcast spins into two, the second being about healthcare. Want to thank also Ami Patak, who guided my dad through physical therapy at Alamance Healthcare Center after his fall and helped him get up and start circulating again with the aid of a walker. Thanks too to my cousin Brad and his wife Tina for driving 8 hours with one of Tina's homemade New York cheesecakes when they heard my dad was in trouble. And to my cousin Ori and his wife Lee for heading down to bring in some of my dad's favorite foods as well. Thanks to my pal Gary Smith for sending over a week's worth of Italian food. My Chinese neighbor Amy for sending over homemade Chinese food. And there's Ana Paula with the Portuguese food. And thank you to Carolyn Pugh for brightening up the house with flowers. And oh man. Then there's Randy Owens for stepping up to do my dad's taxes just at the deadline. Now, Randy is no ordinary accountant. Oh no. He is a cash flow architect. But when Herb's taxes needed to be done on deadline and he was coughing through COVID, Randy was there for him. Thank you so much, brother. Got to thank Doug Breaker, the CEO of MD Hearing Aid, for sending over state-of-the-art television headphones. They're not even on the market yet, so that my dad could have the volume pumped up as loud as he likes it. And I gotta say, he is a little hard of hearing. You can hear Turner Classic Movies at night about 3 blocks away from the house when he pumps up that volume. But when he put the headphones on, it gave me the silence to get some work done. Doug's company, MD Hearing Aid, produces FDA-registered hearing aids at a fraction of the customary cost, and all of the testing and fine-tuning is done through the internet. I'm fascinated with companies that are reshaping healthcare, and MDHearing.com is one of them. If you know someone who could use a hearing aid at a good price, you're going to want to tell them to check out MDHearingaid.com. This is a company not only with eyes on the future and good ears, but also with a huge heart. Jesus, this is starting to sound like the acknowledgement section of a book, but so many people leaned in with encouragement. I want to thank tennis star Maria Sharapova for sending an inspirational note encouraging my dad to get up. We hung it on the wall in front of his bed. Shannon Lee for sending a motivational message from her dad, Bruce Lee, and Urban Meyer, coach of the NFL's Jacksonville Jaguars, for sending along a message letting my dad know it's never too late to become a Jaguars fan. Thanks from my brother Chet and I to all the grandkids and cousins and relatives for zooming in with constant support, and my dad's buddies at IBM, especially you, Jim Collins, for continually checking in as well. Herb is still here. Yesterday, he was guiding his youngest granddaughter, Bridget, through the preparations of making bread pudding. And I'm grateful for every experience we'll have just like it going forward. It occurs to me as I wrap up here that what my dad and my family have been through is not simply our story. During the next 10 years, America will be going through a huge shift that's been identified and labeled the Silver Tsunami. For the first time, there will be more older people in this country than younger, and those older people will need to be cared for. I've learned so much from this experience, and down the road, I'll pass on a lot more. But for now, I simply want to let you know how grateful I am to have each passing minute with my dad. And I'm glad to be able to share our love for each other with you and to have you on the journey as I seek out the best people and companies to help shed light on the best ways to reshape healthcare. Good days are coming. Appreciate every second. Cheers!